Section 16 of Cyropaedia, The Education of Cyrus, by Xenophon. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by John Martin. Cyropaedia, The Education of Cyrus, by Xenophon. Translated by H.G. Dakins. Book 4, Chapter 3. But it was not long before some of the Medes returned. One set had overtaken the wagons that had gone ahead, seized them, and turned back, and were now driving them to the camp, laden with all that an army could require, and others had captured the covered carriages in which the women rode, the wives of the Assyrian grandees, or their concubines, whom they had taken with them because of their beauty. Indeed, to this day, the tribes of Asia will never go on a campaign without their most precious property. They say they can fight better in the presence of their beloved, feeling they must defend their treasures, heart and soul. It may be so, but it may also be that the desire for pleasure is the cause. And when Cyrus saw the feats of arms that the Medes and the Hyrcanians had performed, he came near reproaching himself, and those that were with him. The others, he felt, had risen with the time, had shown their strength, and won their prizes, while he and his had stayed behind like sluggards. Indeed, it was a sight to watch the victors riding home, driving their spoil before them, pointing it out with some display to Cyrus, then dashing off again, at once in search of more, according to the instructions they had received. But though he ate out his heart with envy, Cyrus was careful to set all their booty apart, and when he summoned his own officers again, and standing there they could all hear what he had to propose, he spoke as follows: "My friends, would you all agree, I take it, that if the spoils displayed to us now were our own to keep, wealth would be showered on every Persian in the land, and we ourselves, no doubt, through whom it was won, would receive the most? But what I do not see is how we are to get possession of such prizes unless we have cavalry of our own. Consider the facts," he continued. "We Persians have weapons with which, we hope, we can rout the enemy at close quarters. But when we do rout them, what sort of horsemen, or archers, or light-armed troops could ever be caught and killed, if we can only pursue them on foot? Why should they ever be afraid to dash up and harry us, when they know full well they run no greater risk at our hands than if we were stumps in their orchards? And if this be so, it is plain that the cavalry now with us consider every gain to be as much theirs as ours, and possibly even more. God wot! At present things must be so. There is no help for it. But suppose we were to provide ourselves with as good a force as our friends. It must be pretty evident to all of us, I think, that we could deal with the enemy by ourselves, precisely as we do now with their help. Then, perhaps, we should find they would carry their heads less high. It would be of less importance to us whether they chose to stay or go. We should be sufficient for ourselves without them. So far, then, I expect that no one will disagree. If we could get a body of Persian cavalry, it would make all the difference to us. But no doubt you feel the question is, how are we to get it? Well, let us consider first. Suppose we decide to raise the force, exactly what we have to start with and what we need. We certainly have hundreds of horses now captured in this camp, with their bridles and all their gear. Besides these, we have all the accoutrements for a mounted force, breastplates to protect the trunk, and light spears to be flung or wielded at close quarters. What else do we need? It is plain we need men. But that is just what we have already at our own command. For nothing is so much ours as our own selves. Only some will say we have not the necessary skill. No, of course not, and none of those who have it now had it either before they learned to get it. Ah, you object, but they learnt when they were boys. Maybe, but are boys more capable of learning what they are taught than grown men? Which are the better at heavy physical tasks, boys or men? Besides, we, of all pupils, have advantages that neither boys nor other men possess. We have not to be taught the use of the bow, as boys have. We are skilled in that already. Nor yet the use of the javelin. We are versed in that. Our time has not been taken up, like other men's, with toiling on the land, or laboring at some craft, or managing household matters. We have not only had the leisure for war, it has been our life. Moreover, one cannot say of riding, as much of so many warlike exercises, that it is useful but disagreeable. To ride a horseback is surely pleasanter than to trudge afoot. And as for speed, how pleasant to join a friend betimes whenever you wish, or come up with your quarry, be it man or beast, and then the ease and satisfaction of it. Whatever weapon the rider carries, his horse must help to bear the load. Wear arms and bear arms, they are the same thing on horseback. But now, to meet the worst we can apprehend, suppose, before we are adepts, we are called upon to run some risk, and then find that we are neither infantry nor thoroughgoing cavalry. This may be a danger, but we can guard against it. We have it always in our power to turn into infantry again at a moment's notice. I do not propose that by learning to ride we should unlearn the arts of men on foot. Thus spoke Cyrus, and Chrysantas rose to support him, saying, "For my part, I cannot say I so much desire to be a horseman as to flatter myself that once I can ride, I shall be a sort of flying man. At present, when I race, I am quite content if, with a fair start, I can beat one of my rivals by the head, or when I sight my game, I am happy if, by laying legs on the ground, I can get close enough to let fly javelin or arrow before he is clean out of range. But when once I am a horseman, I shall be able to overhaul my man as far as I can see him, or come up with the beasts I chase and knock them over myself, or else spear them as though they stood stock still. For when hunter and hunted are both of them racing, if they are only side by side, it is as good as though neither of them moved. And the creature I have always envied," he continued, "the centaur, if only he had the intelligence and forethought of a man, the adroit skill and the cunning hand, with the swiftness and strength of a horse, so as to overtake all that fled before him, and overthrow all that resisted. Why, all these powers I shall collect and gather in my own person, when once I am a rider. Forethought I intend to keep with my human wits. My hands can wield my weapons, and my horse's legs will follow up the foe, and my horse's rush shall overthrow him. Only I shall not be tied and fettered to my steed, flesh of his flesh, and blood of his blood, like the old centaur, and that I count a great improvement on the breed, far better than being united to the animal, body and soul. The old centaur, I imagine, must have been forever in difficulties. As a horse, he could not use the wonderful inventions of man, and as a man, he could not enjoy the proper pleasures of a horse. But I, if I learn to ride, once set me astride a horse, and I will do all that the centaur can, and yet, when I dismount, I can dress myself as a human being, and dine and sleep in my bed like the rest of my kind. In short, I shall be a jointed centaur that can be taken to pieces and put together again, and I shall gain another point or so over the original beast. He, we know, had only 2 eyes to see with and 2 ears to hear with, but I shall watch with 4 eyes, and with 4 ears shall I listen. You know, they tell us a horse can often see quicker than any man, and hear a sound before his master, and give him a warning in some way. Have the goodness, therefore, he added, to write my name down among those who want to ride. And ours too, they all cried, ours too, in heaven's name. Then Cyrus spoke, Gentlemen, since we are all so well agreed, suppose we make it a rule that every one who receives a horse from me shall be considered to disgrace himself if he is seen trudging afoot, be his journey long or short. Thus Cyrus put the question, and one and all assented, and henceforth it is that even to this day the custom is retained, and no Persian of the gentle class would willingly be seen anywhere on foot. End of section 16. Recording by John Martin.
Section 17 of Cyropaedia, The Education of Cyrus, by Xenophon. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Lucy Perry. Cyropaedia, The Education of Cyrus, by Xenophon. Translated by H. G. Dakins. Book 4, Chapter 4. In this debate their time was spent, and when it was past midday, the Median cavalry and the Hyrcanians came galloping home, bringing in men and horses from the enemy, for they had spared all who surrendered their arms. As they rode up, the first inquiry of Cyrus was whether all of them were safe, and when they answered yes, he asked what they had achieved. And they told their exploits in detail, and how bravely they had borne themselves, magnifying it all. Cyrus heard their story through with a pleasant smile, and praised them for their work. "I can see for myself," he said, "that you have done gallant deeds. You seem to have grown taller and fairer, and more terrible to look on, than when we saw you last." Then he made them tell him how far they had gone, and whether they had found the country inhabited. They said they had ridden a long way, and that the whole country was inhabited, and full of sheep and goats and cattle and horses, and rich in corn and every good thing. Then there are two matters, he said, to which we must attend. First, we must become masters of those who own all this, and next we must ensure that they do not run away. A well-populated country is a rich possession, but a deserted land will soon become a desert. You have put the defenders to the sword, I know, and rightly, for that is the only safe road to victory. But you have brought in as prisoners those who laid down their arms. Now, if we let these men go, I maintain we should do the very best thing for ourselves. We gain 2 points. First, we need neither be on our guard against them, nor mount guard over them, nor find them victuals, and we do not propose to starve them, I presume. And in the next place, their release means more prisoners tomorrow, for if we dominate the country, all the inhabitants are ours. And if they see that these men are still alive, and at large, they will be more disposed to stay where they are, and prefer obedience to battle. That is my own view, but if any one sees a better course, let him point it out. However, all his hearers approved the plan proposed. Thus it came to pass that Cyrus summoned the prisoners and said to them, Gentlemen, you owe it to your own obedience this day that your lives are safe, and for the future, if you continue in this conduct, no evil whatsoever shall befall you. True, you will not have the same ruler as before, but you will dwell in the same houses, you will cultivate the same land, you will live with your wives and govern your children as you do now. Moreover, you will not have us to fight with, nor anyone else. On the contrary, if any wrong is done you, it is we who will fight on your behalf. And to prevent any one from ordering you to take the field, you will bring your arms to us and hand them over. Those who do this can count on peace and the faithful fulfilment of our promises. Those who will not must expect war, and that at once. Further, if any man of you comes to us and shows a friendly spirit, giving us information and helping us in any way, we will treat him not as a servant, but as a friend and benefactor. This, he added, we wish you to understand yourselves and make known among your fellows. And if it should appear that you yourselves are willing to comply, but others hinder you, lead us against them, and you shall be their masters, not they yours. Such were his words, and they made obeisance and promised to do as he bade. End of section 17. Recording by Lucy Perry, in Bath, on July 9th, 2016.
Section 18 of Cyropaedia, The Education of Cyrus, by Xenophon. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. Cyropaedia, The Education of Cyrus, by Xenophon. Translated by H. G. Dakins. Book 4, Chapter 5. And when they were gone, Cyrus turned to the Medes and the men of Armenia, and said, It is high time, gentlemen, that we should dine, one and all of us. Food and drink are prepared for you, the best we had skill to find. Send us, if you will, the half of the bread that has been baked. There is ample, I know, for both of us, but do not send any relish with it, nor any drink, we have quite enough at hand. And do you, he added, turning to the Hyrcanians, conduct our friends to their quarters, the officers to the largest tents, you know where they are, and the rest where you think best. For yourselves, you may dine where you like, your quarters are intact, and you will find everything there prepared for you exactly as it is for the others. All of you alike must understand that during the night we Persians will guard the camp outside, but you must keep an eye over what goes on within, and see that your arms are ready to hand. Our messmates are not our friends as yet. So the Medes and Tigranes with his men washed away the stains of battle, and put on the apparel that was laid out for them, and fell to dinner, and the horses had their provender too. They sent half the bread to the Persians, but no relish with it and no wine, thinking that Cyrus and his men possessed the store, because he had said they had enough and to spare. but Cyrus meant the relish of hunger and the draught from the running river. Thus he regaled his Persians, and when the darkness fell he sent them out by fives and tens and ordered them to lie in ambush around the camp, so as to form a double guard against attack from without and absconders from within. Anyone attempting to make off with treasures would be caught in the act. And so it befell, for many tried to escape and all of them were seized. As for the treasures, Cyrus allowed the captors to keep them, but he had the absconders beheaded out of hand, so that for the future a thief by night was hardly to be found. Thus the Persians passed their time. But the Medes drank and feasted and made music and took their fill of good cheer and all delights. There was plenty to serve their purpose, and work enough for those who did not sleep. Cyaxares, the king of the Medes, on the very night when Cyrus set forth, drank himself drunk in company with the officers in his own quarters to celebrate their good fortune. Hearing uproar all about him, he thought that the rest of the Medes must have stayed behind in the camp, except perhaps a few. But the fact was that their domestics, finding the masters gone, had fallen to drinking in fine style and were making a din to their heart's content, the more so that they had procured wine and dainties from the Assyrian camp. But when it was broad day and no one knocked at the palace gate except the guests of last night's revel, and when Cyaxares heard that the camp was deserted, the Medes gone, the cavalry gone, and when he went out and saw for himself that it was so, then he fumed with indignation against Cyrus and his own men, to think that they had gone off and left him in the lurch. It is said that without more ado, savage and mad with anger as he was, he ordered one of his staff to take his troopers and ride at once to Cyrus and his men, and there deliver this message: "I should never have dreamt that Cyrus could have acted towards me with such scant respect, or, if he could have thought of it, that the Medes could have borne to desert me in this way. And now, whether Cyrus will or no, I command the Medes to present themselves before me without delay." Such was the message, but he who was to take it said, "And how shall I find them, my lord?" "Why," said Cyaxares, "as Cyrus and his men found those they went to seek." "I only asked," continued the messenger, "because I was told that some Hyrcanians who had revolted from the enemy came here and went off with him to act as guides." When Cyaxares heard that, he was the more enraged to think that Cyrus had never told him, and the more urgent to have his Medes removed from him at once, and he summoned them home under fiercer threats than ever, threatening the officer as well if he failed to deliver the message in full force. So the emissary set off with his troopers, about 100 strong, fervently regretting that he had not gone with Cyrus himself. On the way they took a turning which led them wrong, and they did not reach the Persians until they had chanced upon some of the Assyrians in retreat and forced them to be their guides, and so at last arrived, sighting the watchfires about midnight. But though they had got to the camp, the pickets, acting on the orders of Cyrus, would not let them in till dawn. With the first faint gleam of morning Cyrus summoned the Persian priests, who are called Magians, and bade them choose the offerings due to the gods for the blessings they had vouchsafed. And while they were about this, Cyrus called the peers together and said to them, "Gentlemen, God has put before us many blessings, but at present we Persians are but a scant company to keep them. If we fail to guard what we have toiled for, it will soon fall back into other hands, and if we leave some of our number to watch our gains, it will soon be seen that we have no strength in us. I propose therefore that one of you should go home to Persia without loss of time, and explain what I need, and bid them dispatch an army forthwith, if they desire Persia to win the empire of Asia and the fruits thereof. Do you," said he, turning to one of the peers, Do you, who are the eldest, go and repeat these words, and tell them that it shall be my care to provide for the soldiers they send me as soon as they are here. And as to what we have won, you have seen it yourself, keep nothing back, and ask my father how much I ought to send home for an offering to the gods, if I wish to act in honour and according to the law, and ask the magistrates how much is due to the Commonwealth. And let them send commissioners to watch all that we do and answer all that we ask. So, sir," he ended, "you will get your baggage together and take your company with you as an escort. Fare you well." With that message he turned to the Medes, and at the same moment the messenger from Cyaxares presented himself, and in the midst of the whole assembly announced the anger of the king against Cyrus, and his threats against the Medes, and so bade the latter return home at once, even if Cyrus wished them to stay. The Medes listened, but were silent, for they were sore bested. They could hardly disobey the summons, and yet they were afraid to go back after his threats, being all too well acquainted with the savage temper of their lord. But Cyrus spoke. "Herald," said he, "and sons of the Medes, I am not surprised that Cyaxares, who saw the host of the enemy so lately, and knows so little of what we have done now, should tremble for us and for himself. But when he learns how many have fallen, and that all have been dispersed, his fears will vanish, and he will recognize that he is not deserted on this day of all days, when his friends are destroying his foes. Can we deserve blame for doing him a service? And that not even without his own consent? I am acting as I am only after having gained his leave to take you out. It is not as though you had come to me in your own eagerness and begged me to let you go, and so were here now. He himself ordered you out, those of you who did not find it a burthen. Therefore I feel sure his anger will melt in the sunshine of success, and, when his fears are gone, it will vanish too. For the moment then," he added, turning to the messenger, "you must recruit yourself, you have had a heavy task. And for ourselves," said he, turning to the Persians, "since we are waiting for an enemy who will either offer us battle or render us submission, we must draw up in our finest style. The spectacle perhaps will bring us more than we could dare to hope. And do you," he said, taking the Hyrcanian chieftain aside, "after you have told your officers to arm their men, come back and wait with me a moment." So the Hyrcanian went and returned. Then Cyrus said to him, "Son of Hyrcania, it gives me pleasure to see that you show not only friendliness but sagacity. It is clear that our interests are the same. The Assyrians are my foes as well as yours, only they hate you now even more bitterly than they hate me. We must consult together and see that not one of our present allies turns his back on us, and we must do what we can to acquire more. You heard the Medes summon the cavalry to return, and if they go, we shall be left with nothing but infantry. This is what we must do, you and I. We must make this messenger, who is sent to recall them, desirous to stay here himself. You must find him quarters where he will have a merry time and everything heart can wish, and I will offer him work which he will like far better than going back. And do you talk to him yourself, and dilate on all the wonders we expect for our friends if things go well. And when you have done this, come back again and tell me." So the chieftain took the Mede away to his own quarters, and meanwhile the messenger from Persia presented himself equipped for the journey, and Cyrus bade him tell the Persians all that had happened, as it has been set out in this story, and then he gave him a letter to Cyaxares. "I would like to read you the very words," he added, "so that what you say yourself may agree with it, in case you have questions asked you." The letter ran as follows: "Cyrus to Cyaxares, greeting. We do not admit that we have deserted you, for no one is deserted when he is being made the master of his enemies. Nor do we consider that we put you in jeopardy by our departure. On the contrary, the greater the distance between us, the greater the security we claim to have won for you. It is not the friend at a man's elbow who serves him and puts him out of danger, but he who drives his enemies farthest and furthest away. And I pray you to remember what I have done for you, and you for me, before you blame me. I brought you allies, not limiting myself to those you asked for, but pressing in every man that I could find. You allowed me, while we were on friendly soil, only to take those whom I could persuade to follow me, and now that I am in hostile territory, you insist that they must all return. You do not leave it to their own choice. Yesterday I felt that I owed both you and them a debt of gratitude, but today you drive me to forget your share, you make me wish to repay those, and those only, who followed me. Not that I could bring myself to return you like for like. Even now I am sending to Persia for more troops, and instructing all the men who come that, if you need them before we return, they must hold themselves at your service absolutely, to act not as they wish, but as you may care to use them. In conclusion, I would advise you, though I am younger than yourself, not to take back with one hand what you give with the other, or else you will win hatred instead of gratitude; nor to use threats if you wish men to come to you speedily; nor to speak of being deserted when you threaten an army, unless you would teach them to despise you. For ourselves, we will do our best to rejoin you as soon as we have concluded certain matters which we believe will prove a common blessing to yourself and us. Farewell." "Deliver this," said Cyrus, "to Cyaxares, and whatever questions he puts to you, answer in accordance with it. My injunctions to you about the Persians agree exactly with what is written here." With that he gave him the letter and sent him off, bidding him remember that speed was of importance. Then he turned to review his troops, who were already fully armed, Medes, Hyrcanians, the men Tigranes had brought, and the whole body of the Persians; and already some of the neighbouring folk were coming up to bring in their horses or hand over their arms. The javelins were then piled in a heap, as before, and burned at his command, after his troops had taken what they needed for themselves, but he bade the owners stay with their horses until they received fresh orders. This done, Cyrus called together the officers of the Hyrcanians and of the cavalry, and spoke as follows: "My friends and allies, you must not be surprised that I summon you so often. Our circumstances are so novel that much still needs adjustment, and we must expect difficulty until everything has found its place. At present we have a mass of spoil, and prisoners set to guard it, but we do not ourselves know what belongs to each of us, nor could the guards say who the owners are, and thus it is impossible for them to be exact in their duties, since scarcely any of them know what these duties may be. To amend this you must divide the spoil. There will be no difficulty where a man has won a tent that is fully supplied with meat and drink, and servants to boot, bedding, apparel, and everything to make it a comfortable home. He has only to understand that this is now his private property, and he must look after it himself. But where the quarters are not furnished so well, there you must make it your business to supply what is lacking. There will be more than enough for this, of that I am sure. The enemy had a stock of everything quite out of proportion to our scanty numbers. Moreover, certain treasurers have come to me, men who were in the service of the king of Assyria and other potentates, and according to what they tell me, they have a supply of gold coin, the produce of certain tributes they can name. You will send out a proclamation that this deposit must be delivered up to you in your quarters. You must terrify those who fail to execute the order, and then you must distribute the money. The mounted men should have 2 shares apiece, for the foot soldiers 1, and you should keep the surplus, so that in case of need you may have wherewith to make your purchases. With regard to the camp market, proclamation must be made at once, forbidding any injustice. The hucksters must be allowed to sell the goods they have brought, and when these are disposed of they may bring more, so that the camp may be duly supplied." So the proclamations were issued forthwith. But the Medes and the Hyrcanians asked Cyrus, How are we to distribute the spoil alone without your men and yourself?" But Cyrus met question by question. "Do you really think, gentlemen, that we must all preside over every detail, each and all of us together? Can I never act for you and you for me? I could scarcely conceive a surer way of creating trouble or of reducing results. See," said he, "I will take a case in point. We Persians guarded this booty for you, and you believe that we guarded it well. Now it is for you to distribute it, and we will trust you to be fair. And there is another benefit that I should be glad to obtain for us all. You see what a number of horses we have got already, and more are being brought in. If they are left riderless, we shall get no profit out of them, we shall only have the burden of looking after them. But if we set riders on them, we shall be quit of the trouble and add to our strength. Now if you have other men in view, men whom you would choose before us to share the brunt of danger with you, by all means give these horses to them. But if you would rather have us fight at your side than any others, bestow them upon us. Today, when you dashed ahead to meet danger all alone, great was our fear lest you might come to harm, and bitter our shame to think that where you were, we were not. But if once we have horses, we can follow at your heels. And if it is clear that we do more good so mounted, shoulder to shoulder with yourselves, we shall not fail in zeal. Or if it appears better to support you on foot, why, to dismount is but the work of a moment, and you will have your infantry marching by your side at once, and we will find men to hold our horses for us." To which they answered, "In truth, Cyrus, we have not men for these horses ourselves, and even if we had them, we should not do anything against your wish. Take them, we beg you, and use them as you think best." "I will," said he, "and gladly, and may good fortune bless us all, you in your division of the spoil and us in our horsemanship. In the first place," he added, "you will set apart for the gods whatever our priests prescribe, and after that you must select for Cyaxares what you think will please him most." At that they laughed, and said they must choose him a bevy of fair women. "So let it be," said Cyrus, "fair women and anything else you please. And when you have chosen his share, the Hyrcanians must see to it that our friends among the Medes who followed us of their own free will shall have no cause to find fault with their own portion. And the Medes on their side must show honour to the first allies we have won, and make them feel their decision was wise when they chose us for their friends. And be sure to give a share of everything to the messenger who came from Cyaxares and to his retinue. Persuade him to stay on with us. Say that I would like it, and that he could tell Cyaxares all the better how matters stood. As for my Persians," he added, "we shall be quite content with what is left over, after you are all provided for. We are not used to luxury, we were brought up in a very simple fashion, and I think you would laugh at us if you saw us tricked out in grand attire, just as I am sure you will when you see us seated on our horses, or rather rolling off them." So they dispersed to make the distribution, in great mirth over the thought of the riding. And then Cyrus called his own officers and bade them take the horses and their gear, and the grooms with them, number them all, and then distribute them by lot in equal shares for each division. Finally he sent out another proclamation, saying that if there was any slave among the Syrians, Assyrians, or Arabians who was a Mede, a Persian, a Bactrian, a Carian, a Cilician, or a Hellene, or a member of any other nation, and who had been forcibly enrolled, he was to come forward and declare himself. And when they heard the herald, many came forward gladly, and out of their number Cyrus selected the strongest and fairest, and told them they were now free, and would be required to bear arms, with which he would furnish them, and as to necessaries, he would see himself that they were not stinted. With that he brought them to the officers and had them enrolled forthwith, saying they were to be armed with shields and light swords so as to follow the troopers, and were to receive supplies exactly as if they were his own Persians. The Persian officers themselves wearing corslets and carrying lances, were for the future to appear on horseback, he himself setting the example, and each one was to appoint another of the peers to lead the infantry for him. End of section 18. Section 19 of Cyropaedia, The Education of Cyrus, by Xenophon. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. Cyropaedia, The Education of Cyrus, by Xenophon. Translated by H.G. Dakins. Book 4, Chapter 6. While they were concerned with these matters, an old Assyrian prince, Gobryas by name, presented himself before Cyrus, mounted on horseback and with a mounted retinue behind him, all of them armed as cavalry. The Persian officers who were appointed to receive the weapons bade them hand over their lances and have them burned with the rest. But Gobryas said he wished to see Cyrus first. At that the adjutants let him in, but they made his escort stay where they were. When the old man came before Cyrus, he addressed him at once, saying, "My lord, I am an Assyrian by birth. I have a strong fortress in my territory, and I rule over a wide domain. I have cavalry at my command, 2,300 of them, all of which I offered to the king of Assyria, and if ever he had a friend, that friend was I. But he has fallen at your hands, the gallant heart, and his son, who is my bitterest foe, reigns in his stead. Therefore I have come to you, a suppliant at your feet. I am ready to be your slave and your ally, and I implore you to be my avenger. You yourself will be a son to me, for I have no male children now. He whom I had, my only son, he was beautiful and brave, my lord, and loved me and honored me as a father rejoices to be loved. And this vile king, his father, my old master, had sent for my son, meaning to give him his own daughter in marriage, and I let my boy go with high hopes and a proud heart, thinking that when I saw him again the king's daughter would be his bride. And the prince who is now king invited him to the chase and bade him do his best, for he thought himself far the finer horseman of the two. So they hunted together, side by side, as though they were friends, and suddenly a bear appeared, and the two of them gave chase, and the king's son let fly his javelin, but alas, he missed his aim, and then my son threw, oh, that he never had, and laid the creature low. The prince was stung to the quick, though for the moment he kept his rancour hidden. But soon after that they roused a lion, and then he missed a second time, no unusual thing for him, I imagine, but my son's spear went home, and he brought the beast down and cried, "See, I have shot but twice and killed each time." And at this the monster could not contain his jealousy, he snatched a spear from one of his followers and ran my son through the body, my only son, my darling, and took his life. And I, unhappy that I am, I, who thought to welcome a bridegroom, carried home a corpse. I, who am old, buried my boy with the first down on his chin, my brave boy, my well-beloved. And his assassin acted as though it were an enemy that he had done to death. He never showed one sign of remorse, he never paid one tribute of honor to the dead, in atonement for his cruel deed. Yet his own father pitied me, and showed that he could share the burden of my grief. Had he lived, my old master, I would never have come to you to do him harm. Many a kindness have I received from him, and many a service have I done him. But now that his kingdom has descended to my boy's murderer, I could never be loyal to that man, and he, I know, could never regard me as a friend. He knows too well how I feel towards him, and how, after my former splendour, I pass my days in mourning, growing old in loneliness and grief. If you can receive me, if you can give me some hope of vengeance for my dear son, I think I should grow young again, I should not feel ashamed to live, and when I came to die, I should not die in utter wretchedness." So he spoke, and Cyrus answered, "Gobryas, if your heart be set towards us as you say, I receive you as my suppliant, and I promise, God helping me, to avenge your son. But tell me," he added, "if we do this for you, and if we suffer you to keep your stronghold, your land, your arms, and the power which you had, how will you serve us in return?" And the old man answered, "My stronghold shall be yours, to live in as often as you come to me. The tribute which I used to pay to Assyria shall be paid to you. And whenever you march out to war, I will march at your side with the men from my own land. Moreover, I have a daughter, a well-beloved maiden, ripe for marriage. Once I thought of bringing her up to be the bride of the man who is now king, but she besought me herself with tears not to give her to her brother's murderer, and I have no mind to oppose her. And now I will put her in your hands, to deal with as I shall deal with you." So it came to pass that Cyrus said, "On the faith that you have spoken truly and with true intent, I take your hand and I give you mine. Let the gods be witness." And when this was done, Cyrus bade the old man depart in peace, without surrendering his arms, and then he asked him how far away he lived, "Since," said he, "I am minded to visit you." And Gobryas answered, "If you set off early tomorrow, the next day you may lodge with us." With that he took his own departure, leaving a guide for Cyrus. Then the Medes presented themselves. They had set apart for the gods what the Persian priests thought right, and had left it in their hands, and they had chosen for Cyrus the finest of all the tents, and a lady from Susa, of whom the story says that in all Asia there was never a woman so fair as she, and 2 singing girls with her, the most skilful among the musicians. The second choice was for Cyaxares, and for themselves they had taken their fill of all they could need on the campaign, since there was abundance of everything. The Hyrcanians had all they wanted too, and they made the messenger from Cyaxares share and share alike with them. The tents which were left over they delivered to Cyrus for his Persians, and the coined money they said should be divided as soon as it was all collected, and divided it was. End of section 19.
Section 20 of Cyropaedia, The Education of Cyrus, by Xenophon. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Rosie Roberts from California. Cyropaedia, The Education of Cyrus, by Xenophon. Translated by H.G. Dakins. Book 5, Chapter 1. Such were the deeds they did, and such the words they spoke. Then Cyrus bade them set a guard over the share chosen for Cyaxares. "And what you have given me," he added, "I accept with pleasure, but I hold it at the service of those among you who enjoy it the most." At that one of the Medes, who was passionately fond of music, said, "In truth, Cyrus, yesterday evening I listened to the singing girls, who are yours today, and if you could give me one of them, I would far rather be serving on this campaign than sitting at home." And Cyrus said, "Most gladly I will give her. She is yours, and I believe I am more grateful to you for asking than you can be to me for giving. I am so thirsty to gratify you all." So this suitor carried off his prize. And then Cyrus called to his side Eraspus the Mede, who had been his comrade in boyhood. It was he to whom Cyrus gave the medium cloak he was wearing when he went back to Persia from his grandfather's court. Now he summoned him and asked him to take care of the tent and the lady from Susa. She was the wife of Abradatus, a Susian, and when the Assyrian army was captured, it happened that her husband was away. His master had sent him on an embassy to Bactria to conclude an alliance there, for he was the friend and host of the Bactrian king. And now Cyrus asked Eraspus to guard the captive lady until her husband could take her back himself. To that Eraspus replied, "Have you seen the lady whom you bid me guard?" No, indeed, said Cyrus, certainly I have not. But I have, rejoined the other. I saw her when we chose her for you. When we came into the tent, we did not make her out at first, for she was seated on the ground with all her maidens round her, and she was clad in the same attire as her slaves. But when we looked at them all to discover the mistress, we soon saw that one outshone the others, although she was veiled and kept her eyes on the ground. All her women rose with her, and then we saw that she was marked out from them all by her height, and her noble bearing, and her grace, and the beauty that shone through her mean apparel. And under her veil we could see the big teardrops trickling down her garments to her feet. At that sight the eldest of us said, "Take comfort, lady. We know that your husband was beautiful and brave, but we have chosen you a man today who is no whit inferior to him in face or form or mind or power. Cyrus, we believe, is more to be admired than any soul on earth, and you shall be his from this day forward." She rent the veil that covered her head and gave a pitiful cry, while her maidens lifted up their voice and wept with their mistress. And thus we could see her face and her neck and her arms, and I tell you, Cyrus, I myself and all who looked on her felt that there never was and never had been in broad Asia a mortal woman half so fair as she. Nay, but you must see her for yourself. Say, rather I must not, answered Cyrus, if she be such as you describe. And why not? Asked the young man. Because, said he, if the mere report of her beauty could persuade me to go and gaze on her today, when I have not a moment to spare, I fear she could win me back again, and perhaps I should neglect all I have to do, and sit and gaze at her for ever. At that the young man laughed outright and said, "So you think, Cyrus, that the beauty of any human creature can compel a man to do wrong against his will? Surely if that were the nature of beauty, all men would feel its force alike. See how fire burns all men equally. It is the nature of it so to do. But these flowers of beauty, one man loves them and another loves them not, nor does every man love the same. For love is voluntary, and each man loves what he chooses to love. The brother is not enamored of his own sister, nor the father of his own daughter. Some other man must be the lover. Reverence and law are strong enough to break the heart of passion. But if a law were passed saying, Eat not, and thou shalt not starve, drink not, and thou shalt not thirst, let not cold bite thee in winter, nor heat inflame thee in summer, I say there is no law that could compel us to obey, for it is our nature to be swayed by these forces. But love is voluntary. Each man loves to himself alone, and according as he chooses, just as he chooses his cloak or his sandals. Then, said Cyrus, if love be voluntary, why cannot a man cease to love what he wishes? I have seen men in love, said he, who have wept for very agony, who were the very slaves of those they loved, though before the fever took them they thought slavery the worst of evils. I have seen them make gifts of what they ill could spare. I have seen them praying, yes, praying, to be rid of their passion, as though it were any other malady, and yet unable to shake it off. They were bound hand and foot by a chain of something stronger than iron. There they stood at the beck and call of their idols, and that without rhyme or reason, and yet poor slaves, they make no attempt to run away, in spite of all they suffer. On the contrary, they mount guard over their tyrants, for fear these should escape. But the young man spoke in answer. True, he said, there are such men, but they are worthless scamps, and that is why, though they are always praying to die and be put out of their misery, and though 10,000 avenues lie open by which to escape from life, they never take one of them. These are the very men who are prepared to steal and purloin the goods of others, and yet you know yourself, when they do it, you are the first to say stealing is not done under compulsion, and you blame the thief and the robber. You do not pity him, you punish him. In the same way, beautiful creatures do not compel others to love them or to pursue them when it is wrong. But these good-for-nothing scoundrels have no self-control, and then they lay the blame on love. But the nobler type of man, the true gentleman, beautiful and brave, though he desire golden, splendid horses and lovely women, can still abstain from each and all alike, and lay no finger on them against the law of honour. Take my own case, he added. I have seen this lady myself, and passing fair I found her, and yet here I stand before you, and am still your trooper, and can still perform my duty. I do not deny it, said Cyrus, Probably you came away in time. Love takes a little while to seize and carry off his victim. A man may touch fire for a moment and not be burnt. A log will not kindle all at once. And yet, for all that, I am not disposed to play with fire or look on beauty. You yourself, my friend, if you will follow my advice, will not let your eyes linger there too long. Burning fuel will only burn those who touch it, but beauty can fire the beholder from afar, until he is all aflame with love. "Oh, fear me not, Cyrus," answered he. "If I look till the end of time, I could not be made to do what ill befits a man." "A fair answer," said Cyrus. "Guard her then, as I bid you, and be careful of her. This lady may be of service to us all one day." With these words they parted. But afterwards, after the young man saw from day to day how marvellously fair the woman was, and how noble and gracious in herself, after he took care of her, and fancied that she was not insensible to what he did, after she set herself through her attendants to care for his wants and see that all things were ready for him when he came in, and that he should lack for nothing if ever he were sick, after all this, love entered his heart and took possession. And it may be there was nothing surprising in his fate, so at least it was. Meanwhile Cyrus, who was anxious that the Medes and the allies should stay with him of their own free choice, called a meeting of their leading men, and when they were come together he spoke as follows: "Sons of the Medes and gentlemen all, I am well aware it was not from need of money that you went out with me, nor yet in order to serve Cyaxares. You came for my sake. You marched with me by night, you ran into danger at my side, simply to do me honour. Unless I was a miscreant, I could not but be grateful for such kindness. But I must confess that at present I lack the ability to make a fit requital. This I'm not ashamed to tell you, but I would feel ashamed to add, if you will stay with me, I will be sure to repay you, for that would look as though I spoke to bribe you into remaining. Therefore I will not say that. Even if you listen to Cyaxares and go back today, I will still act so that you shall praise me. I will not forget you in the day of my good fortune. For myself I will never go back, I cannot, for I must confirm my oath to the Hyrcanians, and the pledge I gave them. They are my friends, and I shall never be found a traitor to them. I am bound to Gobryas, who has offered us the use of his castle, his territory, and his power, and I would not have him repent that he came to me. Last of all, and more than all, when the great gods have showered such blessings on us, I fear them and I reverence them too much to turn my back on all they have given us. This, then, is what I must do. It is for you to decide as you think best, and you will acquaint me with your decision." So he spoke, and the first thing to answer was the Mede, who had claimed kinship with Cyrus in the old days. "Listen to me," he said, "O king. For king I take you to be right of nature, even as the king of the hive among the bees, whom all the bees obey and take for their leader for their own free will. Where he stays they stay also, not one of them departs, and where he goes, not one of them fails to follow. So deep a desire is in them to be ruled by him. Even thus, I believe, do our men feel towards you. Do you remember the day you left us to go home to Persia? Was there one of us, young or old, who did not follow you until Astyages turned us back? And later, when you returned to bring us aid, did we not see for ourselves how your friends poured after you? And again, when you had set your heart on this expedition, we know that the Medes flocked to your standard with one consent. Today we have learnt to feel that even in an enemy's country we may be of good heart if you are with us, but without you we should be afraid even to return to our homes. The rest may speak for themselves and tell you how they will act, but for myself, Cyrus, and for those under me, I say we will stand by you. We shall not grow weary of gazing at you, and we will continue to endure your benefits." Thereupon Tigranes spoke. "Do not wonder, Cyrus, if I am silent now. The soul within me is ready, not to offer counsel, but to do your bidding." And the Hyrcanian chieftain said, "For my part, if you Medes turn back today, I shall say it was the work of some evil genius who could not brook the fulfilment of your happiness. For no human heart could think of retiring when the foe is in flight, refusing to receive his sword when he surrenders it, rejecting him when he offers himself and all that he calls his own. Above all, when we have a prince of men for our leader, one who, I swear it by the holy gods, takes delight to do us service, not to enrich himself." Thereupon the Medes cried with one consent, "It was you, Cyrus, who led us out, and it was you who must lead us home again, when the right moment comes." And when Cyrus heard that, he prayed aloud, "O most mighty Zeus, I supplicate thee, suffer me to outdo these friends of mine in courtesy and kindly dealing." Upon that he gave his orders. The rest of the army were to place their outposts and see to their own concerns, while the Persians took the tents allotted to them among their cavalry and infantry, to suit the needs of either arm. Then they arranged for the stewards to wait on them in future, bring them all they needed, and keep their horses groomed, so that they themselves might be free for the work of war. Thus they spent that day. End of section 20.